Joining us today is medium Jenny Lee, an empath, psychic, and channeler who's experienced the paranormal and metaphysical her entire life. Jenny has dedicated herself to honing her extraordinary abilities to connect with spirit guides, angels, extraterrestrials, and higher dimensional energies through mediumship and trance channeling. She is the co-host of the Witching Hours podcast and an accomplished artist whose spirit art provides another conduit for otherworldly expressions. Jenny's path has been one of opening her mind and spirit to the profound strangeness that lurks beyond the thin veil of our physical reality. So let's fasten our spiritual seatbelts as we dive deep into this modern mystic's most intimate encounters with the great beyond. Jenny Lee, welcome to the Transcendent Minds Podcast.
What a fantastic introduction. Thanks.
You're most welcome. Your journey is in the world of the unseen and unexplained. And that's something that has long captured the human imagination.
Yes.
And there are many gifted individuals who I've encountered who can peer beyond the veil and connect with realms beyond our physical reality. And we can see that's both been revered and feared throughout history. You seem to have walked this rarefied path as a medium and channeler and purveyor of the paranormal. To me, your journey into these mystical arts really begs a much deeper exploration. Can you recount any pivotal moments or rising realizations or experiences in your life that first unlocked your sensitivity to the metaphysical world, and what drove you to not just acknowledge it, but to purposefully develop these extraordinary abilities?
My dad would talk about astral travel and past lives, and we talk about ghosts and ETs and UFOs. It was normal for me. My dad had a lot of experiences over the course of his life, and he's a storyteller. He's always telling his stories, even if you've heard it 50 times before. One of his stories that he always used to share, which he actually had evidence to back up, was that he would astral travel when he was a child. One of the places that he traveled to was, I don't know the exact location, I should have looked it up, but I didn't even think I was going to talk about this. It's one of the Shinto shrines in Japan. When he was 4 years old, he painted a picture of it. And I have it framed and hanging up. First of all, the fact that a 4-year-old painted this, it has the date written on the back. His mom, my grandma, wrote the date on the back of it. So it's dated. The perspective of it, as an artist, I look at it and I'm like, oh, the perspective of this. I think I would have a problem as an adult painting the perspective of the way he painted the shrine. But then the fact that he hadn't seen any images of this at the time, it's just amazing. So I have all of that in my mind already as a young child because he's sharing these stories. And when I was about 7 years old, we took a field trip to the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, which is a fabulous art museum. I'm so lucky to live in a state that has such a wonderful art museum, especially as an artist. And we go into the Egyptian section. This is the 80s. I don't got all the stuff up to keep people away from touching stuff. And I'm 7. I reach out and I put my finger on this particular sculpture, which I don't remember which one it is now. And every time I go back, I'm looking like, which one was it? Did I touch that day? But I don't remember. But when I touched the sculpture, my finger touched it, I instantly felt like I was being pulled away. My conscious mind was going somewhere. My vision turned black, and it scared me so badly because I didn't know it was happening. And looking back on it, I know now that something about that sculpture, that energy within that stone, was having some kind of interaction with my energy, and whether I was going to see a vision or leave my body, or I don't even know. But that's definitely a moment in my childhood that was very important.
Very challenging to interpret what is going on at that time because your prefrontal cortex is not fully formed. So to make sense of what is going on,
And even now, I can't make sense of it, really.
Well, that's the mystery.
Yes,
You got to be in service to the mystery.
absolutely. That's the only reason why we keep searching.
One of the things when I was at school, I asked a lot of questions. And it wasn't exactly encouraged because I was there to follow a curriculum, not really
Yeah.
get an education. But when
Hmm.
you look at the symbology of a question, it's actually a hook to get the
Hmm.
next question. If you have a literacy in symbology, you are symbolically literate, and you look at these visual displays in our language, they are micro coded.
Yeah, I never thought about the question mark being a hook before.
That gets you to the next question because
Hmm.
our answers only inform us of where we've been,
Yeah.
but our questions will tell us the direction we need to go.
Hence why you're a podcast host.
Well, exactly.
You got a lot of questions.
I always have a lot of questions.
Love it.
If you said to me 5 years ago, hey, you're going to be podcasting, I'd be like,
Hmm. Yeah,
no,
I was the
I wouldn't
same
be doing
way.
this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But because of the NDE experience, I couldn't make any sense out of it in terms of the rational way of looking at it, but I could
Hmm.
look at it from a trans rational way by the confluence of my intuition and my sensations, and something was organizing and propelling me to say this is the direction. That's why this podcast was born.
Yeah.
And it's like a hand in the glove. This fits really well. I think it's always timings, isn't it? With anything, it's like you had that
Hmm.
experience, and the timing of that experience may not have enabled you to make sense of it, but that was right for you not to make sense of it
Oh, yeah.
because that's the seed
Absolutely.
that was planted.
Hmm. It starts
Now,
this seeking. Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
And I think much of the time we're not in fear of the situations that we encounter, but the sensations that we might feel about the situation.
Hmm.
When we embrace it fully and embody it, our cognition processes what we're experiencing and we embody it, then we can enact and extend it to
Yes.
others. That's the ripple effect where it's not just going to go in one direction, it can go in many directions for those who have the eyes to see and the ears to discern.
Hmm. Absolutely.
In terms of embracing roles as a medium and a channeler requires an unflinching courage to confront
Hmm.
the unknown because the visions, the voices, the presences, the essences that you encounter could just as easily enthrall as terrify the uninitiated.
Yes.
But you've
Hmm.
forged ahead, you've dedicated to refining your craft through study under esteemed teachers as well. Can you illustrate the process that you go through when connecting with spirit or entity or higher dimensional energy? And how do you discern the authenticity of these encounters and overcome the skepticism that many have about their veracity? Sorry, it was a bit of a mouthful there. It's two
That was a lot of
questions.
questions in a
Yeah.
question. Yeah.
Let me just
There
start
was
with
a
it.
lot of hooks in that question.
Yeah. Okay. The first part is about the. Can you illustrate really the process you go through when
Yeah, like
connecting with us? Yeah.
yeah, like how do I go about connecting with
Yeah.
spirit?
Yeah.
So I every like every person that does any kind of spiritual work, everybody has their rituals that they do. So for me, mine is like setting up my space. I usually light a candle, I light an incense, I burn some sage and some Palo Santo. And then I do a meditative, what I call like a grounding exercise, where I connect myself to the earth. And then I go through all my chakras. And then when I get to my crown chakra, I envision it opening up like doors. And that's like me turning the open sign on for spirit. Hey, I'm open for business now. Whatever we need to talk about today, let's do this. Then once I do that, I'm just open and I'm ready to speak to whoever, whatever comes through.
What's Polisanto?
Palo Santo?
What
Yeah,
is that?
it's just a piece of wood, some kind of wood.
Oh,
And I was always just burning sage, but then I learned that the sage gets rid of the negative, but then it leaves a void. So you have to refill it with something positive. And the Palo Santo is something that puts the positive back in the space. So I
So,
do them together.
so it has certain properties in it. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. The second part is, how do you discern the authenticity of these encounters and
Mm-hmm.
overcome the skepticism that some
Yes.
have
Some,
about
yeah.
about, because I think that's
Mm-hmm.
changing now,
Yeah.
about their veracity?
Discerning the different types of things that come through has been a very unusual experience because really, when I started learning mediumship, I just wanted to be an evidential medium. I just wanted to read people, talk to people's grandmas and give them messages. And that was all that I thought I was doing. But Spirit had a whole nother journey for me because it didn't take long from when I started doing this work that there started to be things that came through that weren't people's loved ones. And I had to figure out every time something new came through, what is this? What am I seeing? What am I experiencing? I think that every person and every medium and anybody that's explores this world will go about that journey in a totally different way. But for me, it was seeing things in this layered way. I saw everything in like the layers of an onion. And the first layer was the place where our loved ones are. The next layer was the angelic realm. The next layer, I don't know what's there because they never show it to me. And there's a few more layers, and then there's like people's higher selves, and it goes up until you get to source. It's been a huge process over the course of the last 3+ years of figuring out all the different types of things. But your question really was, how do you know what you're getting? There have been times when there was deceptive things. For example, there was a reading one time where what seemed like a person showed up and they were trying to say that they were connected to the person I was reading for, but I can only assume that it was my higher self was like, the alert went off. Wah, wah, and no, this is not right. They're not who they say they are. So I always get an alert from someone or my higher self that lets me know that something's amiss. Then I can see what it really is.
In today's rapidly advancing technology and materialism and consumerism, I've heard this said, it lives in some of the populace that the mystic arts are a practice that could easily be dismissed as some archaic holdover. But I see that you do stand firm in their relevance and offering services to help others to
Mm-hmm.
really attune to the unseen forces and past lives. And it's not some mere parlor trick or performance, but it's something
Yeah.
that you approach as a true calling. What is the ethical obligation you feel as a medium and a channeler?
You have to go about your readings in a compassionate way. So no matter what or who comes through, you have to think about how who the person is, what the message is, how that's going to affect the person you're reading for. For example, there's lots of times where when I'm doing an evidential reading, a person comes through who was an abuser or someone who was not pleasant to the person I was reading for, that I'm reading for. When I see that and I sense it, I have to ask them if they even want to hear from that person. And sometimes they say no, and sometimes they're like, no, I need to hear that. That's what they're going for. I need to heal this. Other ethical things about mediumship is you can't necessarily go seeking for the people to read for. You can't go out on the street and be like, oh, hey, your grandma says whatever. That's not acceptable because you don't know what that person's beliefs are. They might think that I'm talking to demons or something. I'm going to scare them. That's not acceptable. So you have to let the people that want the services come to you. So those are a couple of ethical things.
Are there any lines that you will not cross or entities that you refuse to engage with?
I
Question?
won't, yeah, I won't let, because we have had some kind of negative, nasty, like just people spirits come through before that want to start an argument or they want to say something mean. And I'm like, I'm not going to say that to them. That's no. Like you're gonna have to rephrase what you're saying or you're gonna have to leave because we're not doing that. But anything that's like the darker side of things, I will engage. because I feel like that's unnecessary and that I'm capable of doing that. But
What,
nasty people is another thing.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, there's some of those around.
Yeah, there's some of them are still like that when they're dead too,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Gosh.
You
And
did ask me a question earlier too that I did not answer. It was about skeptics. I like to go about skeptics like this because there's plenty of things that I've experienced that I didn't believe in. And my number one example of that is that I didn't used to believe in angels. I didn't until I saw one.
yeah.
And then I had to open myself up to it. So when someone says, I don't believe this or I'm questioning this, I really just have to tell them that's okay. Because even for me, I don't believe something until I experience it for myself. And that's really important.
Mm.
I don't think anybody necessarily has to believe in something if it's not something they've experienced.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Having the visceral experience of something as distinct from just an academic perusal about it or an academic pursuit. It's like with the NDE I had, I'm not there to convince anybody about it.
Mhm.
Frankly, I don't care if they believe in it or not
Yeah.
because I'm not really there to prove that it's real or not. But it was very real for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that's outplayed in my life now, I don't think I'd be here speaking to you about
Mm-hmm.
mediumship and about
Yeah.
channeling and about all these different things I've always had an interest in, but never quite punctured the plasma of the essence of it to be able for it to rain upon me. And now that's coming to fruition. Where do you see these experiences or these practices really fitting into our modern world and the future of humanity's spiritual evolution?
I would like to think that it would become, in my ideal world, this would be something that was open and accepted, and people would realize the value of all the different types of spiritual practices and healing modalities, that it's all something that is very much a benefit to everyone. Do I think that is going to happen anytime soon? We're working on it. But I think that pendulum could very easily swing back the other
Mm,
way. I feel like we've made some momentum, but at any time it could very well just go back to the way it was. I hope that it doesn't, though.
mm. It's almost like a feeling of many changes that will go on, but I think it takes at least two generations to change
Mm-hmm.
anything in terms of politics and education and communication and collaboration. I think all these things are going to change. I see a time when, as an example, we have more say in our communities. I think in Oregon, I think they have a sign when you drive in saying, Welcome to the Free State of Jefferson, and
Yeah.
whereby more and more people are now wanting more say and
Mm-hmm.
more autonomy in their communities and a closer affiliation to the earth and to the
Mm-hmm.
soil and more natural ways of being and more
Yeah.
natural ways of what it means to be human. If some of these natural things were to manifest themselves as a permanent fixture in our
Yeah.
society, it's a feeling of thought process. But I wake up with all these different things going on. Are we coming into a new time where there's going to be a plasma of change and transcendence?
Yes. A lot of the different type readings that I've done over the past few years that aren't evidential, the messages that come through often are that we're in a shift. They use that word a
Mm,
lot. This earth is shifting. You're in a shift. Things are changing. There's been a lot of messages about structures needing to be rebuilt. And I believe they're talking about our societal structures, which is pretty much what you were talking about.
mm,
And then you had said earlier when you were talking about people thinking that this type of work is archaic. I think that's exactly what we're doing, is that we're taking everything back to a time when we were like this, when we had small communities that used nature, that didn't have all this extra stuff that we didn't need, that used the earth for medicine and that knew energy and that knew that spirits were there. It just feels like we're going back to that time. But of course, it'll be different because our world is totally different. We have all these
Mm.
technologies and things.
One of the things I do remember, it's a project that I'm working on, which is to do with a true education, a real education. And it's not about going to school and being able to have good data storage and vomiting out the answers on a piece of paper, but a true education. I was wondering about the indigenous practices of being close to our mother, the earth, being part of
Mm-hmm.
her inner arrangement. And I was thinking to myself, what are the rhythms and the sounds and the impressions that a child can have when you put them close to the earth, and how that permeates their being? What does that do to the integrity and structure of their DNA? And how does it then manifest itself? So, just these are kind of curios that I'm having at the moment about different aspects of nature, because I see in nature's patterns, as an example, trees have a frequency to them.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has a frequency. Fear
Yeah.
is a frequency.
Mm-hmm.
You can see with trees that when they're prone to dryness, the frequency they want to attract is wetness.
Mm-hmm.
That has an impact on our weather patterns.
Mm-hmm.
When you start really looking at what nature has to teach us, it's huge.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely huge.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that's been stripped out of our education
Yes.
in terms of these practices that we can use to heal ourselves. I do believe that the other side, or across the veil, however people term it, there is an intelligence there in the unseen worlds. Sometimes I hear myself and I get a bit sick of myself resurrecting dead men's works. Has its merits, don't get me wrong, it totally has its merits. But what is our rendezvous with the future? What is the future intelligence that needs to come through? How can we
Mm-hmm.
be agencies of amplification for new think, new possibilities,
Yeah.
an active genesis of transformation, where we can look at what the past, because yes, the answers tell us where we've been,
Mm-hmm.
but the questions are telling us what is the direction, not a demand, but it's a direction that we
Mm-hmm.
may need to go in, and it's unknown.
Yep.
And people don't like uncertainty.
Yep. They just want to keep on doing the same
They want
old
to keep on
things.
doing,
Yeah.
right? Go along to get along.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated by your work, and one of the most fascinating and otherworldly aspects of your work is the ability to channel non-physical entities and sources of knowledge, I would say, rather than just information.
Mm.
Although there is information contained within that, from extraterrestrials to ancient figures, divine energies, you've opened yourself up as a conduit for these forces to communicate through you in an
Yeah.
unfiltered way. Can you give descriptive value to the different sensations, visual cues, or signs that occur when you're about to channel a particular entity or source?
When I am going to channel, I know immediately because I feel a pressure being pushed onto my physical body. It usually comes from above, and it's like this constant pressure onto myself. Then my head usually like starts falling backwards, and I don't know what that is. Sometimes I've almost felt like my head is like a satellite dish and they have to put it in the right place. Let's put it in their right place so we can send this radio broadcast into her head. That's what it feels like sometimes. But to me, it seems like there's been two different types of channeling. One is where the energy or the consciousness comes really like close into my physical body so that my energy and their energy are blending together. But when that happens, my consciousness starts to drift away. And it feels like the best way I can explain it is that my consciousness is a balloon tied to a pole, and the pole being my physical self. And the balloon just starts shifting away, floating away, but it's always connected. Another type of channeling that has happened where it is more like that satellite dish. Like I'm just getting like this. A lot of people refer to it as like a download, but there's like a frequency being broadcast, and it's just like I'm relaying it as it comes through. Yeah.
Wow. Is there a personal preparation that you go through? And secondly, do you need to safeguard yourself in any way for these channeling experiences?
Yes. I took this very basic trance class a few years ago, and the person who was teaching it said that most channelers have a spirit guide or a spirit team that's like their group that they work with. One of those, they call it like a gatekeeper. So there's like a spirit guide who's in charge of what comes through and what can't come through. When I started doing this work, and I could tell that it was going to be something that I was really going to do, I was doing a sitting in the power exercise, which is just like a really deep meditation where you're trying to connect to your own power, but also the power of source. And a person showed up, a spirit guide showed up and showed himself to me over the course of about 3 or 4 of these sessions. And he's a Maya priest. And he has the face paint and the headdress, and he's got this staff thing. It's got like these branches that come up, and it has all these different things on it, like shells and beads and things that make noise. So like he shakes it and it makes noise, which we could go into a huge rabbit hole about sound and frequency and music. But when he uses that sound to ward off the things that shouldn't be there, like that's his way of protecting, I knew immediately that he was my gatekeeper. He had come to be the person to allow things to come through or to not allow things to come through. So I trust him to know what's right for me and what isn't.
You look at ancient practices, especially the ancient Egyptians, they use sound for healing.
Yep.
And you can see it in terms of the Aborigines using sound. Sound is really powerful. And as you say, music, sound, frequencies, vibrations, it all has healing quotient to it. There's an element of, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems to me there's an element of surrender. There's an involvement of surrendering one's consciousness to a certain degree to allow this energy and voice to take hold. That raises the questions about, I don't know if the word is risks, but I'm going to use it, of such an intimate blending, and how much of your own identity or personality may be suppressed. So in your channeling work, how much control or autonomy do you retain as distinct from giving yourself over completely to the source that you're channeling?
So I'm actually in the process of taking a 6-week course with Karen Francis McCarthy, who's teaching. I'm taking her trance class. And she explained it in a very wonderful way. And she said that trance work is, when you're starting out, is 95% you and 5% spirit. The more that you do it and the better you get at it, and the more you can connect, you can get to the point where it's 100% spirit, because your consciousness goes into a state of what she calls oblivion. So you are not aware at all of what is happening or what is being said. I have never gone into oblivion. Perhaps that'll be something I do at some point. But one of the reasons why I don't is because what I usually am doing when I'm doing medium readings is I stream live on Twitch. If you don't know what Twitch is, it's a streaming platform that started out just for gamers to stream video games. But since then, now there's like cooking and podcasts and talk shows and tarot channel. And that's where I usually stream, is on the tarot channel. And I do medium readings on there. So I'm by myself in this exact same space, talking to people online through chat. They're chatting, I'm talking. And when I do a channeling, a channeled reading for someone, I have to be able to bring myself back. I'm not with anybody else. I can't go into that space of oblivion, because I really feel like you need to have at least someone else in the room with you to help you come out of it. So I haven't ever tried to do that. Like, I've consciously made the decision that I didn't want to ever go 100% out. But now that I'm taking this class, I think that would be something I would work towards, but I'd have to do it in a different setting. For me, It really depends on the connection of who is coming through. It also depends on my own energy that day, whether I feel tired or I'm distracted, or whether the things that are coming through are a greater percentage of the spirit or a lesser. And sometimes, even in the channeling, it can fluctuate. Like I can feel my consciousness coming back through and then sliding back out. It's very interesting.
Have you ever had an experience where the influences that were coming through you were hard to disengage from?
When that balloon starts floating really far away, it can be hard for me to come back. The regulars in my chat know that if they see me like I'm having a hard time, that they're using their energy, like calling me back through. Or if I'm doing it in a setting where we're actually able to talk to each other, then somebody will be like, "Oh, Jenny, it's time to come back." But I would say that happens maybe about 25% of the time. And the rest of the time, I can come back pretty easily.
After coming back on that
Mhm.
return, how do you reestablish your mind and persona after these trance like states?
I usually make a lot of noises and then I have to drink water. I usually have to do something like if I'm on Twitch, I'll start reading the chat. Or if it's something else, like maybe I'll start writing down some of the things that came through. I just have to do something physical. I have
Mm.
to speak, I have to read, I have to drink, I have to do things that like get me back into my physical self.
So you move from radiational to gravitational.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
When you are channeling and you're essentially serving or in service to something higher than you, you're serving as a vessel to receive messages from these unseen
Messages.
realms. Could open up to profound insights or new perspectives that challenge what we quote unquote is our understood reality in fundamental ways. What have been some of the most impactful or reality shifting truths, ideas, or revelations that you've encountered through your channeling work?
The one that is the most bizarre and also the most eye opening was we did a night where my husband helped me with this one. We did a channeling session where we purposefully had the intention of trying to talk to ETs, and we just open it up to whoever wants to come through. I'll bring the spirit, you bring the questions, you bring those hooks. And then people in the chat could ask the questions of whatever was coming through. We had the most bizarre thing come through, and I could see it in my mind what they looked like. And they were not humanoid, they looked like a slime mold, which is just a little mold that grows on dying trees that looks like a little pile of jelly. That's what it looked like. But they were having this really in-depth conversation and answering these questions. And the thing that stuck out the most to me, and I don't know if I could ever forget this because it was so important. Basically, what they were saying, you can't judge something to its intelligence or consciousness based on how it looks, because all life is sentient. That's what they said. All life is sentient. I think that a lot of people, especially in the spiritual community, have realized that plants are sentient. We already knew animals are sentient, but then you got to go even deeper. You got to go further than that. You got to look at the things that we're not even used to looking at and realize that they also have this conscious energy that's from source, because that's where it all comes from.
Mm. In a sense, for me, that would force me to reevaluate, which I do anyway consistently, is my own beliefs about the nature of consciousness and
Mhm.
existence or our universe. And that surprises and delights me in so many different ways because of it saying, no, not that way, look at it this way. And
Mhm.
so it's not saying you're right or you're wrong, it's just saying, no, not that way, this way. I look that way, and it's kaleidoscopic. It has all these different colors and different frequencies and different energies and different vibrations to it. I want to touch on your artistic talents
Sure.
because after looking at your website, I sensed an inextricable link to your metaphysical abilities
Mhm.
because it seemed to me spirit art helps create energies and inspiration from unseen realms. And that blending of creativity and channeling, it's quite unique in many ways. Can you describe the process of how you produce these, can I call them spirit art pieces?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what they are. Yeah. After I took that trance workshop, I don't really even know how it came about, but I think it was a combination of the trance class that I took, and I took another workshop where it was about automatic writing. Couldn't get a word to show up for nothing. But then I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm an artist. So, like, why don't I just try this with imagery instead of words? So I put those two things together. We like to call it the trance prance circle, this trance circle that we practice in. I just tried it one day to see if it would even work, and it was working. I just went for it and I did it live on my Twitch stream. And the very first one that we did, there was two different entities that came through, and the image that came through was two different pictures in one. And the first entity that came through was really trying, I don't know what's going on with that guy, but he was really trying to get us to have almost a fearful reverence for a source, that we
Mm.
needed to still be like feeling that we need to have this fear of it. I'm like, I don't like, where is this even coming from? But then he like left and this other energy came in and he was very upset. And he made like this really just harsh, jagged markings on the paper. And he was just having a fit about how we couldn't get it together on Earth. And what are you guys doing? And this shouldn't be like this and all this stuff. That is the person that ends up being my spirit art person. Which we've gotten to the point where he's not so grouchy anymore. But yeah, it's just using that channeling and mixing it with art making. I'm going to be totally honest. This trance class that I'm taking is helping me understand how that is even working or what has even been going on with it, because I didn't really understand even for myself. So I think that really what's happening in the spirit art is that the energy of the spirit is blending with me, but they're giving me the suggestion of what color to pick up or what
Mm.
kind of marking I should be making. It's a little less that I thought, because I was thinking that they were the ones controlling it, but I don't think that's really what's happening now. Taking this class, I think it's more like a psychic suggestion. They're like, hey, we should use the orange. So then I pick up the orange and then, okay, we're going to make this kind of mark. I think it's more of a collaborative thing than I thought it was previously.
Mm. And color is a cloak of force.
Yeah, every color's got its own symbol. You're talking about symbols at the beginning.
Mm.
Yes.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you look at the, our spectrum and the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet,
Mm-hmm.
those are all cloaks of force,
Yeah,
and
they also have their own frequencies.
they have their own frequencies.
Yes.
Exactly. Something else I wanted to ask you is that in addition to connecting with spirits and entities, part of your esoteric exploration involves tapping into past lives and incarnations.
Mm-hmm.
And for those skeptical
Mm-hmm.
of the concept of reincarnation, such abilities always puts one's materialistic beliefs to the test.
Mm-hmm.
How did you become aware that you could access past life memories? And what has that experience been like for you?
That's another one of those things where I was just trying to be an evidential medium. And then one day I'm trying to do a reading for somebody and I'm not getting anybody. And I just start seeing, it's like I'm watching a movie. And
Mm.
I knew this is a past life because it wasn't current. It wasn't in any time that I know of recently. And so it's escalated since then. So it started out just as that because spirit knows what the person needs to hear. That's really what it comes down to, is that spirit knows when a person comes to me for a reading, what that person needs to hear or know at that particular time, whether it's they needed to hear from a deceased loved one, whether they need to see something from a past life, whether they need to have this crazy channeled message from an alien from who knows where, whatever, spirit knows. So the past lives reading started out as those kind of seeing a movie things. But recently, over the past maybe 6 months or so, I started going to the Akashic records first. and I get taken through the Akashic Records, which, if you don't know what the Akashic Records is, the only way I can explain it is it's a physical place in a different realm that holds all the records of every single person that's ever been alive and like every life I've ever had. And it seems to me, from my experiences going there, that each soul has its own section in the library, because I get taken to a place in the library, and it's always really cool because I get to see the different places. I'm walking through this building and I get taken to their section, and then I ask, well, what am I supposed to see at this time? And then a book will come off the shelf, and then I go into that movie. It's always fascinating because the whole process is amazing. My husband's a history teacher. In that regards, I also like history. So I'm getting to see these little windows and glimpses into history as a side note to this being a reading for someone of something they need to hear.
Was there a particularly vivid or significant past life that you tapped into? And how has it informed this current life that you're living?
I've gotten to see maybe not quite a dozen of my own lives at this point. The one that affected me the most, because it was so traumatic, and I guess in some ways it was the one that made me realize that these past life visions are what they are. They're not just seeing some kind of memory of history, because it was so physically taxing on me to see it. I knew it had to be something that I experienced. And I was a young woman living in like some dirt floored shack in probably the Midwest of America in pioneer times. And it showed me like a little bit of the childhood and then a little bit of her young, like adult years. And then I went to the death scene. And that's where it was like, oh, because she died in childbirth. She's having a baby, she hemorrhages. And all of a sudden, I'm floating up in the ceiling and I can see the body that I had just left. The whole time she's like freaking out. She's my baby. In that session of seeing this, me now, I'm just in tears and like my whole body is shaking. I just feel it through my whole physical body that this is something that really happened to me. So once again, it comes back to that you have to experience it for yourself in order to really believe in this past life stuff. Because when you have an experience like that, I don't know how you could disclaim it.
And for someone who's immersed in this world, how do you approach the balance between offering the substantiation of your experiences while still allowing room for mystery and the undefinable and the inexpressible?
For me, I'm just very open that I don't know the answers to everything. Like half the time when something comes through, I'm like, I don't know how this is happening, or I don't understand. And so in a lot of ways, just like you, I have a lot of questions. It's every time you get an answer, you get 20 more questions to go with it. As a medium who also is a Twitch streamer, I get to have those conversations with people on a weekly basis. And it's really wonderful to be in that kind of community where every week we're just able to bounce ideas off of each other, and everybody has their own experiences. Everybody is into something different and researching something different. So we can come together to try to help each other figure it out. And there's always more to learn. Always. We're never going to know it all, Peter. Sorry. We're never going to know it all.
No, not in this one lifetime.
No.
But you have to be a commitment to not only lifelong learning, but to alignment to that learning.
Yeah.
So it becomes part of your basic constitution. Then it's not just academic, as you were saying earlier, it's a visceral experience of it. And
it's that education you were talking about.
It's the education, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's so much more I want to ask you, but time's always a prevailing factor. Do you have any parting words, and where can people find you?
So everything you could ever want to find for me is at my website, mediumjennylee.com, and that's LEA instead of LEE. I stream on Twitch. Monday mornings is an art morning. Tuesday night is a variety night. Wednesday morning is a reading day. And Friday night's my big to do, which is a reading night as well. On Thursday nights, we stream live podcasts called the Witching Hours Podcast on Twitch as well, but you can find that on YouTube and anywhere that you listen to podcasts. I got a YouTube channel. I'm on Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, like everything, everywhere. I even made a TikTok. I don't know if I'm regretting that yet or not. And then I offer personal readings. Luckily, doing all these amazing, wonderful podcasts, I've started to get a lot more personal readings, which are always a wonderful experience. So that's all that stuff's available on my website.
And do you have any passing words at all?
I also teach all this stuff. So I've been teaching class because I was an art educator for 8 years. I got a lot of teaching experience. So I teach this stuff too. A lot of the questions that people ask about how to do all of this stuff yourself, I guess I could leave some parting words about that. And my biggest piece of advice for people that are just trying to tap into their own intuition, or they want to experience mediumship, or they want to be a better tarot reader or whatever, is that you have to trust what you're getting. You can't get in your head and overthink what's coming through. You just have to trust. And that's very different as opposed to someone who has a scientific or a logical mind, because they want to see the evidence. You got to have the evidence. But when you're doing this kind of work, you got to let all that stuff go. And you just have to trust, especially the channeling stuff. Man, if you can't trust and do that surrender, like you were saying, it's just not even going to work.
That's beautiful. And Jenny, I want to thank you so much because you provided us with a truly mind expanding look into your lifelong work as a medium and channeler.
Well, thank you
And
for having me.
you're welcome. Your dedication to refining and ethically protecting your abilities to peer into the unseen realms is, for me, is remarkably
Thanks.
inspiring. While your experiences may strain the credulity of hardened skeptics, they nonetheless force us to reckon with the possibility that there are planes of existence and intelligences that transcend our basic understanding of this material reality.
Yeah.
For listeners, whether you view Jenny's skills through a spiritual, scientific, or simply entertainment lens, there is no denying the powerful implications of what Jenny has shared with us today. And I want to wish you, Jenny, a continued elevation and growth and awe and wonder in your metaphysical journey.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. And I want to say that rather than dismissing these experiences outright, explore, read, look at the mystics from various traditions, consult with regulated extrasensory abilities, remain open minded, because I do feel that the human experience is full of profound strangeness
Oh yeah.
that lies that lies beyond
That's what makes it fun.
exactly that lies beyond the limits of our ordinary perceptions.
Yes.
But I think when we embrace the possibilities of the unseen worlds, we may all become mediums of a sort, allowing the wonders of the metaphysical to enrich our physical reality.
Yes. Beautifully said.
Thank you so much, Jenny.
You're welcome.